Hello, friends. Stephanie Wade here with Volume 12 of the Wade Forward, the Field Trip Edition. Here I am recording on Friday, March 28th at 9 p.m. Paris time. And that's where I'm at. I'm at Paris, staying in this lovely apartment in the Latin Quarter in the 5th arrondissement. And I'm having a blast. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that for fun. I'll show a couple of pictures and talk a little bit about what I'm doing. But first, the homework. Item number one, Saturday, April 5th, is a national day of action standing up for democracy and against the Trump administration's attempt to completely destroy our democracy. We need people power. And so, towards that end, Indivisible and several other groups have called a national day of action. We've looped in the Lavender Democrats, and with the Lavender Democrats, I've helped organize one of the largest protests for that National Day of Action in Southern California. We already have 1,000 RSVPs, unique RSVPs, and we think we're going to double the number of RSVPs. So I'm asking folks, wherever you're at, get to one of these National Days of Action on Saturday, April 5th, and stand up and show the world that Americans aren't going to accept tyranny. And for those of you who are in Southern California, I hope you'll join our event because it's going to be fantastic. Our event is in Santa Ana at Sasser Park. We start at 1 p.m. and we'll go till 2:30 p.m. It's co-sponsored by the organization that I lead as chair, the Lavender Democrats. Another group that I'm a part of, WAVE, Women for American Values and Ethics, and the Super PAC, Activate America. And we put on a terrific, really well-organized event. It's fully permitted, fully insured. It's going to be a peaceful day of nonviolent protest, and we want you there. So I hope you'll come. As I said, I'll drop links in the chat, but the event starts at 1 p.m. on Saturday, April 5th. It'd be nice if you RSVP, but even if you don't, make sure that you're in Sasser Park by 1 p.m. on Saturday, April 5th. And I will also add that that you should probably figure on parking fairly far away. There are parking structures and street parking all over Santa Ana, but we are expecting a large crowd at Sasser Park. Sasser Park is located right near the county administration building and the federal building in downtown Santa Ana at the intersection of Santa Ana, North Santa Ana Boulevard and Ross Street. So I really, really hope that all of you that are my friends here in Southern California are going to come join us and bring a sign, bring water, bring good walking shoes, bring some sunscreen, and most important of all, bring a posse of people who really stand with us, because that's what it's going to take to flip this. Oh, and I don't want to forget this. Part of the homework too is, if you can, give a few dollars to support the No Kings OC Hands Off rally that we're putting on. We've had to raise, we're putting this on really for a wing and a prayer, given how large it is. But we need a city permit. That's $2,000. We needed insurance. That was $550 to get $4 million of coverage. We needed a professional sound system and a stage. It starts to add up. And so we're projecting that we need to raise about $5,000. And as I write this, we've collected just over $2,000. So we could really help, even if it's only $5. It really makes a difference. So that link will be in the chat as well, the donation link to No Kings OC. It goes through the Lavender Democrats, but we're spending all that money strictly on this event, and we won't collect more than we need. And again, I can't emphasize how important enough it is to get off the couch, to get off social media, to actually do political activism, to be involved and do something political. Some of that's going to be knocking doors. Some of that's going to be participating in your local Democratic club. But on this National Day of Action, let's get millions of people out, and starting with thousands of people in Orange County. This is the most effective thing we can do. People power works. It's the number one thing we can do to fight dictatorship. And we need to do that now. In fact, I'm reading Erica Chenoweth and Maria Stevens' book right now, Why Civil Resistance Works. I can recommend it to you. It's terrific. But the point of it is, and what I know from my study of history, is that peaceful, nonviolent protests, when they engage a large part of the population, at least 3.5%, preferably up to about 4 or 5%, those are far more successful than insurgencies at changing governments and fighting totalitarian governments. So this is what we need to do. This is a starting point. You know me, I'm not a big, let's get out a sign and protest. Now is the time for that. And then link up with people and find things to do beyond just the protest. But we need to turn this around. And we need to do it quickly, because the longer we let the Trump people, the Trump Republicans, and their rubber stamps in the courts and in Congress, the longer we let them go and think that they have a mandate to do this or that they can get away with this, which they don't, but the longer we let them stay in power this way, the harder it's going to be. It's going to, totalitarianism, right now it's wet cement. We can't let it solidify. Action number 2. Monday, March 31st, is National Transgender Day of Visibility. I don't think there'll be a lot of visibility at the White House or in the halls of Congress. But I'm going to ask all of you to help make us visible. And I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do on Transgender Day of Visibility. I'm flying back from Paris that day, and I'm going to be wearing this button and not hiding my trans identity in any respect as I come through customs. I will tell you that since I've arrived here in Paris, the only side eye I've gotten, the only attitude, has been from an American couple that we were on a tour with. So, like I said, please find yourself a transgender button or flag. There's time to order one now if you need to. But even if you're not trans, stand with us and make trans people visible. You can wear one of these buttons and people could mistake you as trans and be like, oh, that's great. I don't care what it is. Trans people and our allies need to be visible on Monday, March 31st. And homework assignment number 3. I'm going to ask you all to chime in a little debate that I've been having with a lot of my other, especially queer people and allies, about Sarah McBride. I'll drop a link, a couple links, including an op-ed that I've shared with some of you all before. But I would really like to hear from you, not so much just about Sarah McBride, but what Sarah McBride represents in the Democratic Party, where we're going to go as a Democratic Party, particularly on issues of LGBTQ rights, and obviously, most important of all, those of us who are transgender and are facing such assault right now. So, it's my contention that the reason the Democratic brand sucks right now, the reason that a terrible, terrible man like Donald Trump can squeak by with 49% and win the popular vote with 49%, the reason that happens is I think it's not Democratic policies. And we're a pretty big tent. We have a number of policies and we can have disagreements. No, it's because the Democratic brand, in my estimation, in my personal point of view, is represented by too many squishy Democrats who, since Bill Clinton, have been triangulating and moving to the right as some way to find these magical unicorns that are going to agree with us. And it's not that I'm extremely left. It's that what happens is we wind up having people with no character, people with no fight, people like Chuck Schumer, and in my view, Sarah McBride, who place comedy over everything. They want to get along with everybody. And they talk to bullies, which is what the Republican Party has certainly become. It's long been, but it's worse now than ever. And they want to appease bullies. They're a bunch, as I've said before, we desperately need a Churchill and we're awash in a sea of Chamberlains. And there are some people, Bernie, AOC, um, that rally and fight hard and that have a consistent message. But the most important thing is, I think, it's less about the policies and more about a consistent willingness to stand up for values. When you sound squishy on these issues, core issues, like do you believe that transgender people have rights or not? And when you sound squishy on that, people who might be, transphobic adjacent and might not think too well of transgender people, but when they hear you say that and they know that you're going to vote for transgender rights, they say, how is that squish ever going to help and support me if they won't even stand up for their own people? And that's what I think Sarah McBride does. And I compare her very unfavorably to a lot of other transgender elected officials who are out there right now. Now, she's the highest ranking one. Sarah McBride is the first transgender person ever to win a federal elected office. And she fought for that. She spent years building, she was ambitious and she was groomed by the Biden family and others, including the governor of her state from a very young age. And she's very bright, she's very articulate, but I say she lacks backbone and she's selling the transgender community out. So I would like to hear a little bit from all of you in the chat about your thoughts on Sarah McBride, and particularly as what she represents about the Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, Gavin Newsom triangulate, move closer to the right to get these theoretical moderates by having no principles Democratic Party. I did put my spin on there. Feel free to disagree with me. That's what I'm asking for. I'm asking for honest opinions. Ooh, I almost forgot. Bonus homework assignment, if you choose to accept it. On Sunday, April 6th, the day after the big rally that's the most important thing you can do is make sure you're at these rallies, especially ours, the No Kings OC rally in Santa Ana on Saturday the 5th. Well, the next day on the 6th, there is a rally in support of transgender troops happening outside the Camp Pendleton main gate in Oceanside. I'll drop a link to that one as well. There's a Facebook group. If you can make it, please do. It's being put on by the spouse of a transgender sailor. And that's a very difficult thing to do, to be a military dependent and to put on a rally and engage in political discourse around a military policy. But this is obviously the time to do it. And I attended a rally that the same individual put on about 3 weeks ago. And it was great, but there were only about 30 of us. I'm really trying to help this person. I'm trying to help them get at least 100 people out there, maybe 150, 200. That would be amazing and make a great statement. So if you can make it, that's in Oceanside, and I'll put the time in there, but I believe it's 10 a.m. Oceanside, main gate at Camp Pendleton, and the address will be in there, and a Facebook link if you want to share and say you're going. And so let me just take a couple more minutes for the fun part now. It hasn't been fun watching the news, and I'm staying up over here, and I'm watching Whiskey-gate. Hegseth-gate. Hegseth must have got drunk and started giving away war secrets to his buddies on Snapchat, and yeah, that's been a pretty ugly one. And look, the news cycle's ugly. So let me just share a few happy things about what a society can be like. So I will tell you that there's a different feeling here. The food is great. The architecture is amazing. The scope of this city that's been so well preserved. The quality of life that people lead here. There's much to emulate. And as I said, there's a different feeling. I think it's a feeling we used to call in the United States freedom, because that's the way I feel here. And I thought about it. I said, I could almost be an expat. But what I really realized is I'm an American through and through. And even though I find myself ashamed of the current administration, and in some ways ashamed of the who the nation has elected. In spite of that, I know I'm never going to let them have my country. I'm going to fight for it tooth and nail, and I could never be happy giving up my citizenship as an American. But it's a pretty incredible place. I was, expecting to love it. I've seen all sorts of great sights. Some of the highlights are I went to the home of the invalids, where the tomb of Napoleon, and visited Napoleon's tomb, but also the Great Military History Museum, which I would compare very favorably with the Royal War Museum in London. It's incredible. And I'll share some pictures of that. Obviously, I've walked down the Champs Elysees, I've been to the Eiffel Tower. I eat a great croissant and a terrific latte every morning for breakfast that are just to die for, better than anything I get at home. I have wonderful sandwiches for lunch, and then we eat out every night at some fabulous little bistro and have a fantastic meal. But the thing that really spoke to me the most, and even more special than seeing some of my Jacques Louis David paintings, some of my favorite paintings from history, and seeing the Nike of Samothrace, the goddess of winged victory, which is one of my favorite sculptures that I've known about since I was a young college kid and took a course and saw it on the cover of Jansen's History of Art. For all the wonderful things we've done and seen here and visited, the most powerful and the most traumatic for me was visiting the Normandy beaches. We took a little side trip, an overnight, and we went to Normandy. And we had a wonderful tour guide who I will proudly plug. Let me find his card here. But Louis, Louis Boubet. And I will make sure that his information is also in the chat because he was fantastic, and I'm going to give him a great Yelp review. I studied 6 years of military history at Duke University. I've read about military history my entire life. My family's a military family. I spent 9 years as a Marine, including 5 as an infantry officer. And from the time I was a young kid, I revered the men of D-Day that included my grandfather. He actually landed on D+3 on the third day, when the battle for Normandy was still very much going on, and fought his way across the rest of the Europe. He was an intelligence officer. But to visit those beaches was profound. To visit the American cemetery in Normandy, to see Bloody Omaha, to see Saint-Mère-Église, where Americans literally dropped into an inferno while being shot at. It was all extremely moving. But the most moving part of it was the manner in which our French hosts have remembered America's contribution to restoring the honor, dignity, and freedom of France. I believe there are 18 full-time gardeners at the American Cemetery. And it's every bit as emotional as visiting Arlington. To see the graves of these soldiers and sailors who gave their lives for democracy and whose family chose to leave them in the soil where they had died in France. And the French people have done so much and continue to preserve that legacy and remember and honor it. And to hear Louis and other Frenchmen talk about their gratitude to the United States, and to hear the stories about people who were bombed by American and British bombs, but came out in droves to thank Americans for liberating them from the Germans. That was really touching. And all the more so because so many Americans have gotten in the habit routinely of denigrating the French, Europeans in general, and particularly our current administration with its, you know, J.D. Vance, co-president Musk, Donald Trump, NATO hating, bone spur having, never serving Donald Trump, and the way they're breaking the back of the NATO alliance and spitting on every ally we ever had. And the president's press spokesperson coming out and saying, well, the French should be grateful that they're not speaking German right now. How about Americans being a little grateful for the fact, and I want to emphasize this as a historian, one of my major fields, in fact, my primary one, was colonial American history. And I was a military historian. The American Revolution only succeeded because of the French people. Some of it was realpolitik, that we were fighting the British and weakening the British Empire. But the preponderance of their support for the United States was a general Enlightenment belief in the values that were being espoused by the United States. Values I would argue that the current administration sullies with every minute of its rotten existence. But French people, especially the bourgeois and the intellectuals and the people of power and substance and the people of Paris, even the most humble people of Paris, understood the American Revolution and supported it and lent us millions of dollars, which we never paid back. Millions of dollars. We sent Ben Franklin and John Adams and even a guy I studied, Henry Lawrence, though he was captured along the way by the British. We sent some of the most prominent Americans, leaders we had, to travel to France to bring people like the Marquis de Lafayette, and ultimately a French army and a French navy that achieved the signal victory at the Battle of Yorktown. We're talking about thousands of French soldiers. In addition to giving millions upon millions of dollars, or livres, that was never paid back, the French sent more than 22,000 sailors and 12,000 soldiers to fight directly in our war of independence. They lost more than 2,000 men fighting for us. And then France sent us, because they admired our liberty, they sent us in the 19th century the Statue of Liberty. And then we were allies in the First World War and in the Second World War and in the Gulf War and in Korea and in 9/11. The French sided with us. They were immediately sympathetic to Americans and supported our invasion of Afghanistan as a righteous cause. And how were they repaid for that friendship in America? Insults, derogatory remarks about their military prowess, which, by the way, if you spent a little time studying their history and knew what they did in the First World War and knew what they did in the Napoleonic Wars, you might understand why, and the number of casualties they suffered in 1940, you might understand why the French had a tough time in the Second World War. But it just makes me sad how quickly America has forgotten all of its friends around the world, has this despicable go it alone America first crap. Yeah, America paid a lot more in defense spending than a lot of the European countries. But you know what America got out of that? It got support of loyal allies. It got a world economic system that has been incredibly favorable to us. Deference in almost all world affairs. And that is going to all start going away thanks to these jackasses. We're not going to be able to put all these pieces back together. even if we're as successful as I think we can be in really tearing down the Trump administration and building back a better, much better America with a lot of elements of a social safety net that they have here in France. Even if we get all that, we're never going to repair the damage that's been done to our reputation and our friendships. Friendships that people like my grandfather fought, and many of them died, to build with decency and honor and respect. So I just hope you'll throw that in people's faces. More than 2,000 Frenchmen gave their lives in our revolution alone. Remember that when people start insulting our friends. Oh, and about that social safety net, I realized I ran out of one of my heart medications while I was here. I take a blood thinner to prevent stroke, and I realized I was a couple of pills short. And I went and they sold me an entire 30-day supply for $60, 60 euro. If I had had to pay cash in the States for that, it would have been $230. France is looking kind of good, isn't it? But I'm coming back. And remember, I'm wearing this pin. You do the same. See you on the 31st. And most importantly, I'll see you at the No Kings OC Hands Off Rally on April 5th, Saturday, April 5th at 1 p.m. Get there early by 12:30 or so you can park and get there early. Bring a sign, bring friends, and we're working on taking back our country and building it back better than ever. Cheers. Oh, and I'll set up a little sideshow and throw in a couple pics. Oh, and I don't want to forget this. Part of the homework too is if you can give a few dollars to support the No Kings OC Hands Off rally that we're putting on. We've had to raise. We're putting this on really for a wing and a prayer, given how large it is. But, we need a city permit. That's $2,000. We needed insurance. That was $550 to get $4 million of coverage. We needed a professional sound system and a stage. It starts to add up. And so we're projecting that we need to raise about $5,000. And as I write this, we've collected just over $2,000. So we could really help even if it's only $5. It really makes a difference. So that link will be in the chat as well, the donation link to No Kings OC. It goes through the Lavender Democrat. So these are just a couple of pictures from our first night in Paris and our first meal at just a little brasserie just down the street from where we're staying. It was obviously wonderful. This is just a tiny little elevator in the apartment where we're staying. It could only fit 2 people, and it's really slow, but it's really neat, and it's a mark of just how old our building is, and it's just really charming. One of our first stops was obviously Notre Dame, and so here are a couple of pictures of just our little quick trip through Notre Dame, which you can still see is going under some repairs and construction, but it's phenomenally restored and just amazing to see. So this is just enjoying fine Paris weather up by the Seine right before we got on our boat trip, our bateau boat trip you see here. Great way to see the city. One of many views of the Eiffel Tower. So these next pictures are the Arc de Triomphe. This is from the top looking down the Champs-Élysées. This is immediately under the arch. And these next pictures are of the Invalides, and right now I'm starting with, obviously that's Napoleon and Napoleon's crypt. And now the museum itself, I spent a lot of time in the Napoleonic section. Here, Napoleon is emperor. The next case, the sword immediately above the musket is a Malamute sword, which you might even sort of recognize from my wall back home where I have my Marine Corps officer's sword. It's modeled on the Malamute swords, that this one obviously came from the French wars on the Barbary pirates. So Marine officer swords are modeled on the sword presented to Lieutenant Presley O'Bannon, the U.S. Marine who was fighting the Barbary pirates in 1805. And so you all sort of know about that because you know about the Marine Corps hymn says, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. That's where the Marines were fighting the Barbary pirates, and this style sword was given to Presley O'Bannon by our allies, the Ottoman Empire, for defeating the Barbary pirates. And so that's why, to this day, Marine Corps officer swords like the one I own and have at home, and like this one, are modeled on the Barbary are modeled on the Malamute sword, the Ottoman Malamute. I thought this was one of the most fascinating items in the exhibit. This is the breastplate of a French grenadier who was run through by a cannonball at the Battle of Waterloo. And so you see like literally what that cannonball did to the front of his chest. And now look at the back. Quite an exit wound. This is the outside of Napoleon's tomb. I understand it was the first place Hitler visited when he visited Paris for the first time in 1940. Now we get to our Normandy trip. It started with an overnight staying at this lovely French chateau. And you can see it was surrounded by water and really all that in a bag of chips, 18th century building. And here's the start of our battlefield tour with Louis. We started at Bloody Omaha Beach, the bloodiest part of the Normandy invasion. Then we went to the American Cemetery, which is just a profound experience, and to see the manner in which those 18 French gardeners to this day maintain each grave, hand-cutting the grass around each one. Truly hallowed ground, and what a remarkable tribute our French friends pay to American bravery in the Second World War. These next photos are of Pointe du Hoc. It's the giant cliff overlooking the Omaha beaches where the Germans had initially stationed 155 millimeter howitzers that were encased in these enormous bunkers. Every effort to silence those bunkers or to destroy the bunkers was failed, and the mission of the U.S. Army Rangers was to scale a 100-foot sheer cliff to take out these gun positions. And the Rangers suffered 70% casualties, but they succeeded. And I remember vividly as a kid drawing pictures of these very gun emplacements. I mean, I revered these stories. Remember, my grandfather came across D-Day beaches on the third day of the battle and had a D-Day medal. And my father published a book about D-Day with all these fantastic pictures of the Normandy invasion, including this very gun emplacement. So to see it was really awe-inspiring for me. A really particularly sad part of this whole story is not only that the Rangers lost 70% casualties, but as it turned out, the Germans had moved the guns just days before the invasion to protect them from aerial assault. So their heroism seemed pointless. The fog of war. That's what that is. Here we see the church at Saint-Mary-Glisse. Saint-Mary-Glisse was a key objective of the 82nd Airborne Division. And when they parachuted in the night of June 5th, June 6th, 1944, as fate would have it, there was a fire in the town of Saint-Mary-Glisse. A home went on fire. And it meant that everyone in the town, including the Germans, were out. And it meant that when the paratroopers started to land, they were silhouetted against the light of these fires, and took terrible casualties. You'll see in the picture there's a figure of a paratrooper hanging from the top of the bell tower. That actually represents John Steele, the American 82nd Airborne soldier who actually survived that, even though he was shot and wounded. He was from the city of Metropolis back in the States, and he said he was the real man of steel, John Steele. The next set of photos are from the church at Angoville-en-Pla, a church in a tiny town in the middle of the 101st Airborne's landing zone. And at that site, two American medics Robert Wright and Kenneth Moore set up an aid station and saved the lives of dozens and dozens of American soldiers, but also German soldiers. And to this day, the town remembers their kindness and their courage. You'll see it's a town of about 50 people, and they restored this church, which was just a wreck at the end of the war. But you'll also see, in fact, that a mortar shell came through the roof. You'll see that picture there. And that it crashed without detonating into the floor, breaking that tile you see there. And Robert Wright picked it up and threw it outside the building to save the wounded inside. The next is a stop our very knowledgeable tour guide, Louis, took us to because I had mentioned it, and he was very nice to take us there. And it's the site of the Battle of Brecourt Manor. If you've seen the Band of Brothers, you know this incident. The Battle of Brecourt Manor, morning of June 6, 1944, Lieutenant Winters of Easy Company led an attack on a German artillery battery with six 105 millimeter German howitzers and a company of about 60 Germans defending it. And with just 12 men, in about 2 hours, he had taken out all of those cannons, which had been raining fire and hell down on Utah Beach. Saved an incredible number of lives. And it's still taught today at West Point and, even in the Marine Corps as an example of like almost perfect tactics and aggressiveness of a small unit leader. Well, I'll turn away from one of my favorite subjects, war, now, and start talking about this nice little restaurant that Dee and I visited with Kate, a little Italian place. And so here are some candid shots of Kate and I lounging in our very Parisian, comfy, cozy apartment. It's really cute and feels very homey. And I'll finish out with some pictures of our trip to the Louvre today. Some of the real high points for me were the Jacques-Louis David paintings here, the Oath of the Horatii, and now the Death of Marat. And this was the thing I most looked forward to seeing, and it did not disappoint. It's the Nike of Samothrace, the Greek god of winged victory. I've loved it since 1988, when Christmas 1988, my father got me a copy of Jansen's History of Art, the big hardcover. And the cover was the Nike of Samothrace, and behind it just gold, and it just has spoken to me ever since. I think it's the most beautiful sculpture I've ever seen, and it did not disappoint. One of the most interesting parts of the Louvre is that they've juxtaposed modern fashion items that have been inspired by the Louvre and the art in the Louvre, and the fashions done by Balenciaga and some of the greatest French fashion houses. Well, I'll finish out, as you look at these dresses, but now let's talk about homework again. Hey, most important thing, make sure you make it to one of these National Day of Actions, especially ours, the No Kings OC Hands Off Rally in Santa Ana on Saturday the 5th. And I'll also throw out there, I'd like to hear from folks about what they think about Sarah McBride and the Democratic brand. And, there's also a great opportunity to get out and support the day after our National Day of Action, the next day on Sunday the 6th, support our transgender troops down in Oceanside. Thanks very much, folks. Take care.